Traditional prescriptive grammar, simply called traditional grammar, and it refers to the type of grammar study done prior to the beginning of modern linguistics. Grammar in its traditional sense is the study of structure and formation of words and sentences, usually without much reference to sound and meaning. Whereas in more modern linguistics, grammar is the study of the entire interrelated system of structures within a language, and that interrelated system of structures include sounds, words, meanings, and sentences. Traditional grammar can be traced back over 2000 years and includes grammars from the classical period of Greece, India, and Rome, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance period, the 18th and 19th century, and more modern times. The grammars created in this tradition reflect the prescriptive view. And what is that prescriptive view? It tells us that one dialect or variety of a language is to be valued more than other varieties of that language and should be the norm for all speakers of the language. Now, traditional grammars include two kinds of rules: prescriptive rules and proscriptive rules. Prescriptive rules are the rules that are to be followed for correct construction of sentences, whereas proscriptive rules are the rules of usage to be avoided in order to form correct sentences. For example, when describing an emotion, it is a prescriptive rule to use an English word descended from Latin language, than using a word of Anglo-Saxon origin. And never split an infinitive is an example of a proscriptive rule because it is telling you not to split an infinitive. So it is a proscriptive rule that this should be avoided in order to make correct sentence. The analytical study of language began around 500 BC in Greece and India. The work of Greek scholar Dionysius Thrax is the model for all the grammars of European languages. His grammatic technique, the C stands for century, 100 BC, the art of letters, was the first widely recognized text to provide a curriculum for learning proper Greek. His lessons included an introduction to the alphabet, lessons on how to join syllables together properly, and instruction in the appreciation of word arrangement, that is the syntax. To Thrax, grammar was the technical knowledge necessary to produce the prestige language of poets, orators, and writers. Around the same time, the Roman scholar Marcus Terentius Varro produced the 25 volumes of his De Lingua Latina in 100th century about the Latin language. Varro contrasted Latin with Greek, changed Greek grammatical terms into Latin language, and formed his grammar of Latin by adapting Greek rules. Other Latin grammars influenced by the works of Thrax and Varro were produced in the Middle Ages. Aeneas Donatus published Ars Grammatica, that is the art of letters, in 4th century. And Donat Priscianus, he wrote Institutiones Grammatica in 6th century, that is grammatical foundations. His Priscianus work is the only complete surviving Latin grammar. Now, as printing became more widely available in the Renaissance period, European grammarians began the mass production of grammars of their languages by mirroring the Latin grammars of Varro and Donatus. According to them, the grammatical descriptions of Latin could be applied to other own languages. Own languages means other European languages. This perception, however, was not accurate, and resulted in many artificial prescriptive and proscriptive rules. Many of these false assumptions or false rules still carry over to attitudes about English today. Continuing with this tradition, grammarians in the 18th century studied English along with many other European languages by using the prescriptive approach in traditional grammar. During this time alone, over 270 grammars of English were published. During most of the 18th and 19th centuries, grammar was viewed as the art or science of correct language in both speech and writing. What was the definition of grammar in 18th and 19th century? That it is the art or science of correct language in both speech and writing. By pointing out common mistakes in usage, these early grammarians created grammars and dictionaries to help settle usage arguments and to encourage the improvement of English. One of the most influential grammars of the 18th century was of Lindley Murray's English grammar that was published in 1794 and was updated in new editions for decades. Murray's rules were taught for many years throughout school systems in England and the United States and helped to create modern attitudes about the existence of a correct or a standard variety of English. Murray's grammar represents a practice that continued to develop throughout the 19th century and was still dominant in the 1960s when linguistics began to focus more on generative and transformational grammar due to Chomsky's groundbreaking and influential ideas of generative grammar. Even though linguists today view traditional grammar as an unscientific way to study language and grammar, many of the basic Latin-based notions of grammar can still be found at all levels of the classroom and in textbooks and usage guides available to educators and the public and students. Traditional grammar books usually provide lists of grammatical terms, definitions of those terms, and advice on using so-called standard grammar, including suggested correct usage of punctuation, spelling, and word choice. This advice is usually based on the prescriptive rules of prestige varieties of English, varieties often only able to be used by those in power either economically or politically. What is the definition of prestige varieties of English? That the varieties that are often used by those who are in power, either in economically they are in power or politically they are in power. Now, if we summarize this discussion of historical view of traditional grammar, so we can say that linguists, along with many English faculty, would rather have students study language with a descriptive approach that includes the analysis of real samples of a mixture of English dialect varieties, not just the prescribed and sometimes inconsistent prestige forms. Linguists or teachers using a descriptive approach say that it allows students to investigate language on a deeper level, and it enhances their understanding of the English language or the language or any other language that they are studying, enabling students to see the system at work instead of teaching them isolated prescriptive and proscriptive rules based on Latin, a dead language no longer in flux as English constantly is. So, we can say that linguists or teachers are in favor of using descriptive approach. Their argument is that it allows students to investigate language or to explore language on a deeper level and enable them to see the system, the language system that is at work According to them, teaching them simple prescriptive and proscriptive rules of a language which is a dead language now, constantly is, as English is constantly changing and flourishing, Latin is comparatively a dead language. So telling students some isolated prescriptive or proscriptive rules of that language doesn't work for any betterment in the comprehension of a language. Linguists also believe that the rules of traditional grammar are inadequate because many of these rules are oversimplified, inconsistent, or not constantly conformed to. Moreover, the grammars of classical Greece and Rome were based on the best orators or poets of the day. However, the best poets or speakers of our day are lauded for their poetic use of language that breaks prescriptive rules. For example, a traditional grammar rule of modern English, often found in usage guides and student handbooks, forbids the students from the use of fragment sentences like the train running up the hill. However, in Cummings or Maya Angelou's works, they could use this sentence for poetic effect without any question. Many teachers themselves want to be trained in traditional grammar, even though its inconsistencies may not help them when they have to explain grammatical points to their students. That is, still many teachers, they are in favor of prescriptive grammar. But most of them, they are in favor of, or their arguments are in favor of, descriptive grammar instead of prescriptive grammar. On a conclusive note to traditional prescriptive grammar, the National Council for Accreditation of Teacher Education requires the teachers in training take linguistics or language courses to teach them to examine the difference between traditional and more modern grammars. It is a requirement for the trainee teachers to take language and linguistic courses to have a distinction between, or to be aware of the distinction between traditional and more modern grammars. However, many English teachers view traditional grammar as a necessary grammar, and according to them, newer grammars are of little help to them. Even though more modern types of grammatical analysis exist, many students, future teachers, and the general public still believe grammar means the traditional Latin-based grammar.